Forest is an important thing because they were our first teachers. They're the ones that handed down their roots and their bark to teach us things. We didn't just learn it, we had to be taught by the tree people.
Our traditional ways, how the land benefits us. We only take what we need and nothing more.
With the changing environment, the forest affects all of our waters, whether it's fresh or salt water. When we were small children, we always went to Enitai. Potlatch, basically, we call it Enitai. We would go there and gather clams, oysters, crabs, sea urchins, and as kids you play with, they call them the puddles that had the starfish and sand dollars. There used to be kelp down there. There's no more kelp, there's no more seagrass, and you need the seagrass for the crab. I grew up for the abundance of going down there and poking a sea urchin, and what does it do? It turns itself inside out. Sand dollars, the sea went alive with the little tentacles on the bottom moving. I couldn't take my children down there because the tidal pools are no longer full of anything. I can't take them down there to the eel grass and walk through there barefoot, all scared, am I going to get a crab on me, and reach down and pick one up. A full-grown crab you could eat. It's even less for my grandchildren. I can talk to them like my mom used to talk to me. Our society is changing from my mother's generation. She was born in 1924. She was raised by her grandmother because back then, in Native culture, the parent didn't raise their child. They didn't discipline the child. They were raised by the grandparent and disciplined by Chop, auntie, because they didn't want them to have ill feelings to the parent. She used to go up, Cushman, there was villages there. She went up there with her mama, is what she called her, and they gathered and stayed there and dried their fish before they come back down. She couldn't do that with me because by the time I'm old enough, their two dams have already flooded thousands of acres. And what her mama used to do with her, she couldn't do with me. Yet I'm telling my children my experience at the saltwater.
I grew up in Union, Washington, several miles outside the reservation. My parents got a house out in the woods for us kids to get a more rural upbringing. We got to play in the woods. We got to learn about nature. It was pretty great. There was almost nobody living out here back then. It was maybe one other house on this dirt road that we lived on. But nowadays, fast forward a couple decades, there's a whole neighborhood that's sprouted up around where my parents live. The forest that we used to play in as kids has all been clear-cut. Now, instead of hearing the sounds of nature and wildlife, we can just hear the cars passing on the highway. It's very sad.
Development affects everything in our ecosystem, in our watershed, in the whole Puget Sound. That leads into the fish. That leads into the shrimp, because now there's nothing to eat. There's no protection from the sun. We're more than clams and oysters.
The forest is not only the trees, but it's an entire ecosystem. The ecosystem is a dynamic, diverse, and interdependent network of all living and non-living things, plants, animals, fungi, soil, water, and we're a part of that as well. All of these parts depend on one another for vitality and survival. We're just now discovering that a significant part of forest health resides in the mycorrhizal network under the soil, and this fungal matrix connects the trees and other plants to one another and acts as a transportation system for water sharing and nutrient sharing. It's one way the trees can survive drought. Our forests have been evolving for 200 million years, and climate change is happening too quickly for our forests to adapt. But the forest ecosystem has actually been in decline for the last 200 years, and we're responsible for that. In the early 1800s, when European settlers migrated into Washington, we began over-harvesting the trees. disrupting the soil and killing off most of the elk who ate that brushy understory, which played a big part in forest fire management. We've improved our forest practices since then, but unfortunately, we're still doing harm.
It's important when talking about what's going on to sort of frame where we are. For everybody in Mason County, they live in the Puget Lowland ecoregion, which is actually one of America's most endangered ecoregions. And this is because, Seattle's in it, all of the suburbs have been gradually chipping away at it, but right now it has about 5% of functional habitat remaining. Between urbanization and clear-cut logging, there's almost no habitat left. In Union, we're actually in one of the more undeveloped areas of the Puget Lowlands, and it's predominantly owned by a handful of timber companies. Green Diamond Resource Company is the major player. Mankey, the Department of Natural Resources, owns land here. Merrill and Ring own land here. The Kirk Company. Those are all big landowners that have been doing a lot of clear cutting recently. Now that the timber industry has been granted access to artificial intelligence technologies, they're beginning to optimize their lands basically for maximum production all of the time. At what point can we log it so that we're getting as much money out of the land as we possibly can every year? And what that's translating into is, instead of growing trees that are up to be 100 before they log them, they're starting to log them anywhere from between 20 to 50 years of age. Increasingly, what we're seeing is the entire landscape being leveled and turned into a monoculture of trees that they'll grow back in these really short rotations of 20, 30, 40 years, planting trees more or less in rows, one single species with a little or no wildlife trees. What essentially that means is that they're turning the entire region into one massive clear cut in various stages of recovery. The problem is these companies have no intention of ever letting the forest actually recover. You hear about palm oil plantations in Indonesia. Well, these are tree plantations. There's no difference. In the beginning, everything was logged at once, so everything was sort of the same age. And when they logged it the second time, everything was logged at once again. And now they're logging it a third time, and in some areas even a fourth time, where they're simply knocking everything down all at once.
The forest makes up 52% of our state's land and is therefore a large part of our climate change agenda. And at this point, our trees are the best way we can sequester carbon. Their survival is paramount. Clear cutting is logging all of the trees in a large area. Clear cut lots are hot and dry in the summer, which affects species, habitat, streams, and other wetlands. When a forest is clear cut, the soil disturbances damage the mycorrhizal network.
I like to demonstrate this as a soil that really isn't a living system is like a plate of flour. You can rain on the plate of flour, and all that sand, silt, and clay is falling apart. It's creating flooding. It's creating a drought in the center because water is not soaking in. That's creating erosion and public health issues as the soils and other things go into the rivers and ponds. Mudslides, so all kinds of human health consequences here. What do we add to flour to turn it into bread, to turn it into a sponge? What do we add to soil to turn it into something living? Well, we need life in it. So once you start to get life in the soil, which comes in through plant roots, it starts turning into something more like bread. Suddenly we have space, that beautiful sacred space that water and air and roots and worms and other life can flow through. Once we have that space and we have that structural integrity, those bonds that are actually water resistant. So we have water acceptance and water resistance in the same system. That makes all the difference. This actually allows for life to happen on the planet. It allows plants to grow. It allows water to be held on land rather than all running off instantly into the sea. It allows water to be filtered. And suddenly you're going to see clean water that in a real landscape would be seeping up through springs, clean filtered water that not only has been filtered through this beautiful carbon filter of the land, but also has been, any toxins have been taken apart and put back to their original elements by the life in the soil. We have no flooding here. That you see is underground, and it's coming up maybe through the sides very slowly into the rivers and springs and wells, keeping clean water for all of life, and especially water at the root zone for plants.
Clear cutting also increases flooding and water runoff in the winter, which carries excess silt and other debris into the streams and lakes, harming the salmon reproductive cycle and damaging roads. Clear cuts are then treated with herbicides. This process kills off all of the vegetation. The chemicals seep into the soil with the rain, running into streams and lakes, causing other problems such as blue-green algae overgrowth and injury to amphibians and other creatures. Monoculture planting is the common practice of planting only one tree species. In Western Washington, it's the Douglas fir because it's the most lucrative. This limits species diversity, but it also attracts certain pathogens and pests which love the conifers. Those pests migrate into the forest reserves and the riparian zones. Riparian zones are nutrient-rich and species-rich areas that are specifically located near streams and wetlands, and they're ecologically vital and are especially sensitive to damage.
There are only approximately 7% of old growth forests remaining in the United States. There is an effort to have this program 30-30 by 2030, which is attempting to set aside 30% of the land and 30% of the waters in conservation. We may not even have 30% in our own area left because this land is being logged in a consumptive manner that has no concern for the wildlife. Where are all these animals going to go? Cougars displaced, coyotes displaced, which means that they're going to be shot because people will be upset about their pet dogs and cats. I moved intentionally to Washington State because it was the evergreen state, because of all the beauty that's here. And we're soon going to be deprived of that beauty A lot of us know that the trees are the renewers, not only of our air and the protectors of our water, but they are also renewers of our spirits. What we're seeing is happening all over Washington state as the Department of Natural Resources is allowing these clear cuttings. The land adjacent to streams are being cut on steep slopes. It will collapse into the streams, and there goes the salmon. So the state of Washington has spent tens of millions of dollars to try to recover salmon. And on the other hand, our own Department of Natural Resources is allowing all these clear cuttings.
They don't care about salmon. They don't care about local communities. They don't care about the climate. Their sole purpose is to make money. So we're taking forests that have incredible values for species diversities, for protecting salmon runs, for providing clean, clear water, and turning them into an industrial operation where none of those values are taken into account.
Matita taught me, as many Nuño elders so often do, while doing the work. Singing the songs, planting the seeds, lifting the smoke prayers, or awaiting the harvests. He taught that our people belong to an ancient cosmic lineage, woven as threads through the long web of space and time, eventually becoming the people by inheriting roles and responsibilities to all the other forms of life wherever the ancient ones first emerged. How it was this plant or that animal that took on teaching us how to live in this new world. The forests there were dense and lush beyond imagination, with innumerable species of plants, animals, and other forms of life thriving at every level above and below ground. The ancients learned that forests breathe life for all. They learned that forest spirits daily call to the spirits of the oceans to come and join them. Their sacred ceremonies could be witnessed, were one so bold as to look, as the gentle mist, the fogs and dews and rains that would come daily and soak into the earth. Water is life. This is another of our most ancient teachings. Sacred water was available to all life. This was the abundant natural world my grandfather's ancient grandfathers learned from. Scientists would likely explain instead that those pre-contact dense forests created low-pressure regions, which would trigger biotic pumps along the coast on the cooler shaded forest soils. Microscopic ice-nucleating bacteria rising from those intact forest floors and attracting other water molecules from the forest's very own transpiration of humidity would be named originator of the fogs and mists. Textbooks will eventually define all these processes as small water cycles, quantifying that they make up about half of any local water table. The conveyor belt system of oceans driving those large rainstorms inland, moving water across continents to large inland lakes and then onward to more distant oceans, were named large water cycles. The large and the myriad of small water cycles contribute greatly to any life living on this planet. All life is connected across this earth through the water. My indigenous ancestral nations could find water that was pure enough to drink, whether their territories were coastal, inland grassland, or the more arid regions of pre-contact Mexico. Much has changed since the 1520s, when many first greeted the ones from across the waters. While the colonizers who landed throughout the Americas arrived from different countries and regencies, the effects are tragically similar throughout this continent. For my grandfather's ancestors, this story takes a tragic turn as the Nahuatl Empire's collapsing. The Spanish settlers are arriving. First, the Spaniards stole our continent, enacting titled rights to our lands and waters by power of the papal bulls of Terra Nullius and Intergaitera, that culminated into the doctrine of discovery by manifest destiny, claiming that all indigenous people were not actually people. My ancestors were hunted and killed outright, or enslaved. At least those were who had not already been killed by the many new pandemics that arrived with each wave of European settlement. With this forced labor and the captives arriving incessantly stolen from Africa to these burgeoning Spanish New World occupations, The settlers then started clearing my ancestors' forest, digging their toxic mines in search of gold, silver, tin, and anything else of value to the Spanish or Catholic empires. Next, the soldiers and priests built the missions, villages, towns, and cities. As more forest went down, more dry open land was left to bake in the sun, and our ancient forest soils died. Like traditional Oaxacan pottery, these dead soils were made water impermeable. When the rains did come, it now fell on this depleted clay. So our once healthy rivers overflowed with silt and runoff while eroding the mountains, hills, and arroyos. Any remaining topsoil would then be blown away with the winds in later seasons. Water tables throughout these settler colonies would continue to sink lower. The water quality would decline wherever this pattern of extractive economy occurred. Throughout this colonial era, our dwindling ancient forests died or were logged. Then the desert swept across this landscape. Whoever was left of our traditional people either adapted to this intensely changing environment or were forced to migrate to new lands. Meanwhile, wave after wave of new immigrants would continue to flood in from around the world, seeing this newly formed landscape, but never knowing or realizing what had come before, nor its significance and global importance.
There's a question here about, it says clear cutting. I don't know if that's what it is or if it's the working forests around Union, and that the current cutting is beginning and will continue for 2 years around Alderbrook Resort. The question is, considering historic fires and the state's focus on climate change, would any of our lawmakers, meaning you guys, support a moratorium on cutting until the forests can recover? And I don't really know what needs to recover, but.
So no, I don't support not cutting the trees down, and here's why. A significant study, a scientific study was done about carbon sequestration and carbon sinkability of our Doug firs, Western red cedar, and our major economic drivers in the timber industry. And we found out, and we knew for a long time, but this study proved that timber at a certain age, especially the Doug fir, stops sequestering or absorbing carbon. It's just like a baby human, where they're going to very tiny, eat a lot of calories and grow big and strong like their parents, and their parents actually stop growing at a certain time. If we did that, we would further injure the environment by allowing way more free carbon to be in the environment, and we would further stop programs that put people to work, that complete the carbon sequestration cycle that we have. And that means you need to lock that carbon into a substrate, then you mill that substrate into something that then could be permanently used for housing and that sort of thing. So no, I think it's a bad idea to go backwards in our policy. As a matter of fact, if we really want to protect our forests, we need to understand that treatment and replanting is going to be the thing that sets us free and continues our carbon sink initiative that we have in Washington State.
They're trying to put us at ease with what? so that they can continue making money. I want the truth.
After a clear cut, it takes between 15 and 20 years before that clear cut becomes our net source of carbon sequestration. The young trees start to sequester carbon right away, but we lose a lot of that carbon in the soil. What they gain in carbon, which is not very much because they're so small, is offset by the continuing loss of carbon from the soil and from the dust and everything else that was trashed during the clear cut logging. The industry has created a body of science saying that the best way to save our climate is we log our way to climate health, which is now the official policy of the state of Washington, and it's a concept that's completely bought into by the legislature. The timber industry created a trade group in the University of Washington's School of Forestry. That was called Centrifor. It's there to promote wood products and the wood products industry. They use private money from timber companies, and they're particularly focused on carbon. What's the carbon footprint of a wood building? What Quorum set out to do is to create life cycle assessments. They use private money from timber companies, and they try to match that with public funds to hire scientists, to focus research, and to promote the idea that we should be harvesting our wood much faster. They created this body of research that says that wood is the best product to build with because you end up storing nearly permanently that carbon, and it has a lower carbon footprint than, say, a competing product. To make those numbers work, they didn't count for carbon loss to the losses of dust to clear-cut logging.
These lies are being supported by these companies.
And people will
Fall for it?
Yeah.
You know, my dad was involved in the timber industry and my grandfather for years, but my dad always said, don't refer to it as a clear cut, Tim, it's a sun meadow.
The only advantage for clear cuts is that you can harvest those trees with feller bunchers rather than loggers, so we don't need much employment. The industry is trying to get rid of as many loggers as possible, and they're doing a really good job of that. Even when harvests are rising, the employment is dropping. Everything is designed basically just to make profit for the timber company owners at the expense of timber communities. The timber companies have successfully done is sold this notion that the interests of timber companies are the same as timber communities. And it's absolutely not true.
Douglas fir grows best when it has sunlight. Visually, going up the truck trail right now, there's quite a bit of sun meadows that are visible. But today, in our Department of Natural Resource regulations, those types of even age harvest, we'll call it, even age harvest cannot be done over a certain acreage. I think it's about 100 acres until the adjacent property has a grow up period. And usually that's at least 5 or 6 years to start the seedlings. While it might visually look quite different right now, I assure you it's going to grow back very fast.
Not my huckleberry, my wild huckleberry, the mountain berry. That won't be the first thing to come back anymore. It's going to be the Scotch broom that is choking out all the native plants that's going to come back. So there's no wind. There's no wind when I need to go gather Princess Pine. The Scotch broom has now choked it out for the Douglas fir to grow. So as they're clear cutting and clearing the land of everything, every piece of debris, there's no more nutrients, which means the soil is dead.
In our area, the conifer forest biome, the coastal forest from the redwoods in California up into Alaska, it stores on average, when mature in a natural state, about 726 tons of carbon per hectare, more than twice as much as, say, the Amazon, and tropical rainforests, which store about 320 tons of carbon per hectare. Our soils in the giant conifer biome store more carbon than soils anywhere else on Earth because over years, trees die, branches fall down, leaves fall down. Wood is about 50% carbon. So all that stuff starts to build up in the soil and becomes a massive carbon bank for permanently storing carbon in the forest stands. This is the place where carbon storage can really have a major effect on pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. But we can only do that if we let these forests grow.
Firelight, firelight, firelight my way out of the darkness into the bright day. High up in the sky, twinkling stars shine bright. Here on the mountain we watch through the night. Firelight, firelight, firelight my way out of the darkness into the bright day. High up in the sky, twinkling stars shine bright. Here on the mountain we watch through the night. Butterfly, butterfly, teach me how you fly out towards the ocean to my other life. High up in the sky, colored wings flap free, drift upon wings to the center of me. Humpback whale, show me how to breathe into my body so that I may grieve. Deep into the dark, into the abyss, so I may rise up into all my bliss. Willow tree, will you marry me? I'll plant the flowers for the honeybees. Would you give me shade, kind-heartedly? I'll dance beneath you in reciprocity. Firelight, firelight, firelight my way out of the darkness into the bright day. High up in the sky, twinkling stars shine bright. Here on the mountain we watch through the night.
These trees have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. They've seen more than we could ever see. You could tell they're very old trees. You can feel everything that they've seen, you know, the evolution and all that. Like, they've been there through everything. And you just can pick up on that energy around them.
We call the forest its own family. If you look, the trees don't ridicule how one looks. They'll hold each other up. They'll give themselves support. Part of the whole family, and if you look at the root systems of what they're doing to the earth. In our ecosystem, it's a balance, and I was looking around because I was trying to find a maple. I was trying to find a nursery log is what we call them. It could be the start of a nursery log. It's developing the moss. But within that, it's crumbling and giving the nutrients back.
It's not humans that are giving us all of our wealth. It's our world and everything the world has to offer, the ground, the water, the wind, the sun. All of it has power, and the trees and their stories that come from them, but are just waiting to be picked up and shared with the world and make our world a better place. These guys, it's so awesome to go gather stuff with them because it's not like they're doing it like it's a job. They're doing it like it's a luxury. Like, they know how fortunate they are to be able to do that, be able to retain that information to help not only themselves but their families. So when they're touching this cedar, it brings medicine to them. It brings healing. It brings connection. So this is red cedar. Yellow cedar is a lot more north. All of it. If there's any part of it, there's bear grass that you can weave into it. All of, there's just so many medicines that this world has. So you can see the connection. I mean, they want to come here. There's something they could be doing. They did this gathering all weekend, and it's something that they look forward to, and they had fun, and it was fun to see them having fun. And that's the thing. We need to have it be there so that there's options, because sometimes we pick things that look like they're fun, but they're not in the long run going to be something that's going to benefit our life.
We have aunts, uncles, such as my Aunt Kimberly here. She has saved a lot of things over the years so that we are able to do this. Because I think even she personally knows that this is what's happening, and she needs to save things so that we can experience the same things that she is able to. That my children and grandchildren could be able to do the same things that I was able to do.
Experience what we're experiencing. We're still able to gather stuff like this.
When we go gathering nettles, I had a couple of youth with us, and Winona took us to her spot, and just hearing the stories of how it used to be and what's there, how the whole river has changed course. It's really changed everything that's around there as far as the plants go. The things that we used to have all over the place, now we have to hunt and search. And it's when people ask us, can you take us to go gather whatever it might be? Man, I get angry, like, oh sure, just can I have access to your bank account? Because that's what they're saying. That's what they're asking. They don't intend that, they don't mean that, but that's what they're asking. Because we have to work really hard. When we're doing something, we take the year before to know where we're going to gather next year. We're gathering, but we're really scoping out what's around where and what we're going to do next year. Constantly gathering now and making the plans for next year. Used to just be once. Now we make lots of plans for next year because there's a good chance that 2 or 3 of those places are going to be demolished by the time we get there. We've had beautiful spots and go up there and we're all ready to gather our berries and our roots, and then the space, it's gone. We've gone to gather berries and there's homes there.
There's a certain area I was gathering nettle, and one of the workers asked me, what am I doing? I said, oh, I'm gathering nettle. It's high in vitamin D. It's the first native plant to come back after a heavy winter to provide nourishment. The following year, they went and graded it all up and put mounds of dirt and said they were preparing it. And by the way, it's 20 feet from a creek. That is for fish spawning. But that's what they do, so now I can't go in there and gather it because they disrupted the growth there. I don't care if you're a state park, a fish hatchery, anything, we gather everywhere. They will prevent you from going in there because if I can't go in there, then I can't argue I did this here. They'll go and ruin it because they don't want us coming back. They're doing sneaky things like that, and they've been doing it for years. We're just trying to live as natural as we can, even though I go to the grocery store. But there's certain foods that we can't buy, and that's part of our daily diet. That's our wealth, is our food. It's a big picture when we look at what they're really doing to the environment. What are you doing to the environment and the people? Douglas firs killing the soil within 10 years. It will not reproduce. How are we going to fertilize that soil now? People think the cedar is the utmost important tree. It is. It's very medicinal. So you have to have the combination of trees. If it weren't for the maple, the cedar tree wouldn't have the shade. It would burn up.
How can humans possibly change whole weather and rain patterns? Here in the Pacific Northwest, where the forests are logged and turned into clear cuts or suburban or urban areas, that dry open land allows heat masses to rise and form columns of high pressure that push against humidity trying to enter from the coast. This struggle continues until the ocean's low pressure system grows large enough to overtake that high pressure system and force its way inland. These huge cloudbursts have become a new weather cycle across our coastal and large urban areas. Cycles of destructive, large, quick downpours leading to massive flooding and landslides with long periods of drought in between. All our asphalt and concrete infrastructure prevents water infiltrating into the ground across large areas, further intensifying the problems.
We're pretty spoiled here. You know, as I get older, I realize how spoiled we are. We've had excellent teachers and didn't even know we were being taught. When the Spirit grabs us and we remember the stories of gathering and being a part of this world in a way that not a lot of people have the opportunity to be. We have had beautiful opportunities in roaming through the mountains and woods and gathering plants and medicines and natural dyes and being a part and watching master weavers and listening to our language and hearing stories about how it was when they were children, not really understanding that now we see it's our job to keep it like that and how precious it is. We go up in the woods and we just see the change. It's like not even the same world. It's like we're telling a dream when we talk. We're telling what our children can only imagine. And knowing how big that is and how fast it's happening, we're telling our children this is important. Let's stop this from happening. We have a small window in our lifetime to make a difference in this world, and we want to do our best at doing it. We didn't have the worries when we were younger that we have now, and it's just disappearing, and it's horrifying.
The level of destruction, both to the social ecosystem, these our small communities, is huge, and the ecosystem out in the forest, it's just horrible. And we could make better decisions. We've got good choices before us. We need to start creating carbon parks where these forests can start to do what they do best and pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and start healing the climate. You could start with the municipal forests. In Clallam County, we have about 93,000 acres of DNR-managed trust lands. All those could be converted to carbon parks, and the communities could benefit enormously. For example, those on 93,000 acres, they earn, it varies quite a bit, but it averages about $5 million a year for the trust beneficiaries. If we were paid the social cost of carbon by the federal government for setting aside these forests as carbon parks, which is basically machines to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, we could earn $25 million a year, rising year after year. And what that means is that the junior taxing districts, the schools, the hospitals, the libraries, the local governments could receive twice as much income from these forests as carbon income than they receive now as timber income. And there'd be enough money left over to support people working in the woods to heal these plantation stands. We get more employment, better paid employment, and we'd be healing the climate. It would just be a super good policy, but politically, we can't move the needle.
There has always been a lag time between scientific findings and legislative action. Sometimes this lag time has been months or years, or as we've seen with climate change, it's been decades. We've allowed our legislation to lean toward corporations and profit, not toward the preservation of nature. Now we need to change our priorities. Nature should be our main concern right now, and the trees are the highest priority.
We really need to do it with the understanding that people don't know the damage that they're doing. When people vote about things like this, they're aware and clear and understand the results of their action.
How do we fix the natural ecosystem of the environment without killing it and satisfying the whole commerce of it? Because that's all it is, it's commerce. All about the dollar.
The logging industry does not do well by timber communities. It's always been boom or bust. They could do so much better. We need to get people out into these plantation stands and start converting them to natural forests so that they can support normal populations of wildlife, so that they can start growing at a normal rate, which means packing on carbon at an extremely high rate. We can pay them to do that work. It takes the same skills as they have as loggers, but it's just a different kind of work.
It's up to us to do this. Confronting our own role in climate change is difficult to do, but if we don't take responsibility for our actions, we will have no power to change them.
Don't you think a lot of people would help if they knew what they could do to help?
Things that we eat or medicine, they don't understand that because they're not in our culture. They're made more aware that this is our medicine and this is our resources. They would understand and want to act on it.
What are some of the things that we can do to make a difference and to work together?
We can help our trees into the next century. Establish an equal dialogue between nature and industry. Stop clear cutting and implement variable density thinning. It's a timber harvesting technique that preserves the forest ecosystem and grows large and healthy trees. It would be a great alternative to clear cutting. Avoid the use of herbicides. There are solutions other than using chemicals like glyphosate and other cancer-causing chemicals. Increase the size of protected zones around riparian areas. Currently, they're about 25 to 50 feet, but they should really be extended to about 100. Limit logging on public lands until we are more carbon neutral. Lengthen harvest cycles when possible. Develop products for trees that we actually have in our area. That'll keep our carbon footprint down. Use local resources for milling and wood products manufacturing. Support businesses which produce sustainable materials so we can give our forests a rest. Improve restoration in general with drought-resistant natives.
If we're fighting and not getting anywhere, then what are our kids going to have?
Indigenous people all over the world have been organizing, resisting, speaking out, fighting, and defending for the rights of all the natural world and for a livable future for centuries. We as a global community get to choose a paradigm of life and creation over global destruction. We get to build communities and economies of regeneration and resilience. We can change our story and the ending from the one written in the past generations.
Because we want our kids to be able to live the dream. We were living the dream, and now we know, and we want that same dream and even better for our own grandchildren.
Activate this creativity in its purest form of fertility. Play me like an instrument, like the chords of life's fragility. Guide me to leave no trace as I stride barefoot, please mindfully, in the spaces where I'm most needed. In service and in dignity, let me flow through this odyssey like water down a river, past the rocks and all its obstacles, to gracefully deliver all the gifts I came to give. Please teach me to live peacefully with myself. I am the darkness that is the light. I am the stillness that is the dancing. I am the darkness that is inconsequence. May I find the beauty in each moment, cause in the end that's all I have. May I live every day to its fullest, for it may be my last. Make the unconscious conscious, from humans to my emotions, and the histories long forgotten, may they purge from inner oceans. Stretch me like a rubber band outside my comfort zone, so I'll never have the same resistance to the limitations I made my own. Develop new neural pathways in the mystery of my brain. Pump me full of oxygen, flood my watershed in all its veins. Teach me compassion for those who feel hard to love. Lead us to the places where we can learn from different tongues. I am the darkness that is the light. I am the stillness that is the dancing. I am the darkness that is the light. I am the stillness that is the dancing. Let me live without illusions, without becoming disillusioned. Be resilient beyond self-sabotage, clear the storm-clouded confusions. Give clarity, bring me teachers. Let me take flight from my failures. Allow me to dissolve my ego, my need to be right behaviors. Let my death mark continuance of timeless contributions. Usher my hands back to the earth to give. This is the revolution. Guide me back through footprints of my ancestors to bear the fruits. Feed this spiritual starvation with the grounding of my roots. I wish to know myself to the farthest edge of the farthest edge. Laying on the earth as she absorbs the voices in my head. She whispers, we do unto ourselves as we do unto the web. Please teach me to forgive myself. I am the darkness that is the light. I am the stillness that is the dancing. I am the darkness that is the light. I am the stillness that is the dancing. The forest is our pharmacy. Plant abundance in mentality. Live minimally, act morally. Disrupt patterns of normalcy. Expand perspectives 360 here. Symphonies in everything. Keep tuning up our frequencies. This is our way of rebelling. Be channels for deeper healing. Protect and nurture our energy. Show the circular to balance out the way we've been taught linearly. Bring magic unconditionally. Teach me to bend alchemically. Trust wisdom of my own body. Keep me open to receiving. Humble my ecology. I'm dominant over nothing. Place me in love and act loving. Honor the life in everything. Rising gratitude every morning. I'll look into eyes and I will sing. We're the ones that we've been waiting for. What a time to be alive. I am the darkness that is the light.